And Ryan Bingham, hey, thanks for being on the show. How are you, bro?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. You just told me earlier that you were on set of Yellowstone, the television show you're working on. So thanks for taking a break and talking to us. I've been wanting to get you on the show for a while, and we've kind of built. I wanted to wait and build the show up where I felt like it was worthy of calling my friend Ryan Bingham in before I got him on. um,
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I
well,
appreciate it.
yeah. So anyway, just so the listeners know, you and I met in Jim Jard's hot rod garage,
That's right.
and and how long ago was that, Ryan? Was it over
Gosh,
10 years?
yeah, it had to have been more like
20,
15, I want to
15?
say.
Yeah.
It was
So what
about,
happened is we were at this friend of ours, Jim's, who's kind of a philanthropist type guy with musicians. He's helped all us musicians out when we were starting. But you and I got up and we did a Towns Van Zandt song together, and then we did a Merle Haggard song together.
that's right.
And,
Yeah.
and I was like,
I'm sitting
wow,
there.
yeah, yeah. So, but you'd lived around for a while, but so really, I wanted to ask you a few questions. We've spoke about this before about you growing up in Hobbs, New Mexico, and you were listening to everything from the Rolling Stones to Willie Nelson to whatever. But you know, when did you get your first horse?
I'm sorry, Jesse. You kind of cut out on me there. I couldn't hear you.
When did you get your first horse?
I think the first horse I ever got, I was probably like 11 or 12 years old, and I'm originally from Hobbs, New Mexico, and my family ranched out there, and my grandfather sold that ranch just kind of right before I was born, and everybody went into working in the oil fields, and we originally all moved out to Bakersfield, California for a few years, and then it wasn't until we moved back to West Texas. We moved out to kind of around the Midland, Odessa area. That's when I got my first horse whenever we got back out there. So I was 11 or 12 years old.
11 or 12 years old. I wanted to bring this up because in this book that I'm working on for DeCapo, I talk about, like, you see a lot of belt buckles, a lot of boots and that in Texas, but a lot of these people live in suburbs and they don't own horses. And it's more of a kind of I don't mean that in a judgy way. I just mean it kind of, it's a culture that they grew up with them. But with you, you're like one of the very, few people that I know who actually, got your rodeo card at one point, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. My uncle rode bulls, and my granddad was a cowboy, and my dad, and I always grew up wanting to be like them. And whenever we moved back to Texas, I started to really just get interested in it. And my dad and uncle started hauling me to the junior rodeos, riding steers, and from then on, I just kind of went up the ladder to junior bulls, and then all the way to the big bulls, and got my pro card for a couple of years, and that's really what led me into playing music and getting into all this other mess. So
Right.
it all started on the rodeo trail.
Yeah, I would say that. I hear it in the music. I mean, for the listeners that don't know, I played guitar on your American Love song tour for a big portion of it, and we played one night at in Fort Worth, and you went out and rode in the rodeo before we played, and I was like thinking, man, his agent would be freaking out if he knew.
Yeah, I don't know where on else that would fly other than Fort Worth, Texas.
Yeah, yeah. So one thing I'm trying to not. I don't want to rehash any of these things that you've talked about so much. But one thing that was a real important relationship for you was, and I'm sure it was this push pull struggle relationship, but you meeting Mark Ford and going in and recording what would become Mescalito. Um, how did that happen? Where did you meet him?
Man, it was such a crazy adventure, just kind of getting out to California. I had befriended a guy named Matt Smith in Fort Worth, Texas, and he was a drummer, and we started playing shows together, and it was just me and him. You know, I had an acoustic guitar, and he was playing drums, and we were playing tailgates at the rodeo and flatbed trailers and honky tonks and little bars and just wherever we could play. And we started kind of, you know, going out to California and back. And we didn't really know very many people out there. We had like a friend of a friend that owned a bar called the King there in Hollywood.
It's a great bar.
Her name was Carla Long, and I remember we were just driving out to California to see what kind of trouble we could get into, and we called her up and said, "Hey, you know, could we come play at your bar?" And I said, "We'll just play for tips or whatever we can make, you know. We just want to come play." And she said, "Yeah, you know, you can." On Monday night, there's like a 1 p.m., you know, a 1 a.m. slot, you know. They'll come in, and she goes, "There won't be anybody really here, but you guys can come play." And so we did. And there was like 2 or 3 people in the bar that night, and just one of them happened to be Mark Ford. And he saw us play, and after we played, he came up. He said, "I want to do a record with you guys." And that was it. Like the next week, we were in the studio down there with him and making a record. So it really all just kind of, a lot of things were happening at once. At the same time, I'd been talking to a lady named Kim Bowie, who was the head A&R over at Lost Highway Records. And she was interested in signing me up to Lost Highway. And then we met Mark Ford, and she just thought all that was wonderful. So it all kind of happened at the same time. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. And for the listeners who don't know, Mark Ford played all that killer guitar on the debut Black Crow stuff and is an amazing musician. And, you know, that was a pivotal relationship. And then the next real pivotal relationship was T-Bone Burnett. And you did this, you know, soundtrack for Crazy Heart, and it was a life-changing situation. I was actually good friends with Stephen Bruton, who was involved in some of that too.
He was big time involved in a lot of that. He was in the studio every day and played. You know, that was one of the last songs he played on before he passed away. He played all this mandolin and stuff on that track, and he was a huge influence on that record.
Yeah, and they all had that kind of Fort Worth, because I think T-Bone is originally from Fort Worth as well, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting, Ryan, how many people from Texas and have kind of ended up in Los Angeles stirring up the local color and have really etched out there's a whole group of you guys, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's kind of a big Texas influence out there on the West Coast, and you know, I think you kind of combine that with a lot of the older, you know, kind of Graham Parsons, Flying Burrito Brothers, you know, kind of country music, the Buck Owens and Dwight Yoakam, and you know, the Bakersfield kind of sound. And there's a lot of country twang out there, and a lot of things getting mixed up out there. So
right. Which is really a big nod to your sound. I mean, you know, I think it's a little. When people ask me what kind of music Ryan plays or you play, I don't say Americana normally, but you know, you play a lot of different kinds of music. That was really great to just play guitar for you, because I got to play Mexican music, I got to play blues, I got to play folk music, got to play outlaw country. And one night you were like, "Let's do a Johnny Bush song," and I was like, "Holy shit!" And you know, so that's the way it was with you, like on that tour, and you've always been like that, haven't you?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's just from being in Texas, and especially in Austin. You know, gosh, there's just so many different influences that converge in that area, whether it's the mariachi and Spanish conjunto music, the corridos from the border, the North Texas swing, you know, Bob Wills dance hall stuff, the German polkas, the Cajun Zydeco stuff from Louisiana, and the blues and jazz. And you know, there's just, I think, living in that area, you hear those sounds all the time, you know, depending on what part of the state you travel to. And so a lot of that would just kind of reflect and like, writing songs. And when it came down to the music, I would, it's, a lot of it was just kind of describing these places in my head and, what it smelled like, what it sounded like, you know, how people were talking, the kind of language they were using. So it's always been kind of important for me to use those sounds to represent the areas of where I'm, where I'm talking about. And I think maybe because I moved around Texas so much too. I lived out in West Texas, I lived down in Houston, and I lived in Laredo and Fort Worth, kind of every corner of that spot. And so, I think a lot of those different kind of cultures that converge there just have had a big influence on me growing up, and kind of just made me who I am as far as my identity goes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that, I told this friend of mine who's 20 years older than me, he's kind of a mentor to me, and we were discussing young people that are younger than us that we've learned from. And I was telling him about you. I used you as an example, but I said, when I first met Ryan, I met him at this hot rod shop, and then he calls me and he says, "Hey, I'm playing this happy hour show at Continental." I was like, "Come by, I'll cook y'all some dinner." So you come by in this van that you're basically living in, and you come back, and we sat out on my back porch and made pork chops on the grill and hung out. And you told me this story about how you were this trick rider in the Buffalo Bill Wild West show in Paris, France. And I thought to myself, well, that's what they caught Bob Dylan lying about. But Bob Dylan had told everyone once that he had run off with the rodeo, and another time he'd run off with the circus, neither of which was true. And then lo and behold, 2 weeks later, I'm on stage in Nice, France, playing this big Americana festival. And I tell the monitor guy, "Hey, sorry, we got here late. It sounded great. Thank you." And he goes, "Are you from Texas?" I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Do you know Ryan Bingham?" I said, "Yeah, he was just eating pork chops in my backyard 2 weeks ago." I said, "How do you know?" And he goes, "I was front of house at the Buffalo Bill Wild West show." And I was like, "Oh shit, he's telling the truth, man."
Yeah, that was probably, I can't remember that guy's name, Stefan or something like that, but I remember that guy. Yeah, he would come to these little kind of, me and a buddy, I met this French guy that played banjo, and we'd play in, the Irish pubs and kind of just wherever we could play around Paris, and he would come out and record us, and I think he even recorded maybe a few house concerts, and yeah, that was a hell of a time over there in Paris for sure.
That's amazing, man. Well, you know, um, that's become a big, I bring this up because people spend their entire lives trying to find out who they are. And you've kind of known who you were since I met you. Like throughout everything you've been through, you really haven't changed. I mean, I'm not to sound braggy or anything, but I've got some famous friends, and I've seen them go through some kind of crazy stuff. And you, out of all of them, have really not changed. You still, if you give Ryan Bingham an old gut string guitar and a horse and put him out anywhere, he's happy as a lark, And anyway, do you have any plans to do the Western Festival again, man?
Yeah, we do. We're actually talking about it right now. We're, trying to kind of find a location. We're obviously going to have to scale it back and do something because it's socially distanced. But, the first year we did last in Lukenbach, and we did the first night was kind of a limited thing where it was like 300 or 400 people, and I did a campfire jam with everybody. And so I think that's what we're going to do next year when Cam is just have one night and do like a campfire type setting. And
Right.
And we're just kind of looking for the right spot to do it, and would love to do it out at Lukenbach again. I just don't know with all the rules and what's happening with COVID and stuff of how to go about it yet. But we're definitely not giving up on that dream because it was just so much fun and it went so well the first year. And so
It was amazing. It was amazing. I was so happy to be a part of it and see it come together. And I made a lot of new friends that day, like a lot of young musicians that we'd never met. We're like, like hanging out, drinking beer. And the only thing is if you play guitar with Ryan, though, you got to kind of watch the party because he goes on last.
I know that's a hard thing to do out there.
Well, man, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. thanks I know you're a busy guy, man. So thanks for doing this.
Oh man, it's great to see you, Jesse. Just keep in touch, man, and keep me posted on all things going on in your world, and I'll do the same.
Right on, brother. Take care.